Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers, because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button, and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and working on a product to help people overcome these problems, because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up, and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. Today I have a returning guest that I really enjoy speaking to, and he always gives great advice. His name is Benson Agbortogo. He runs a company called Consistent Profit Tree, and I've been working with Benson for a number of months now to help my business and help me with things in my life. He's been doing a great job. He's got great insights. And as we talk, he'll come up with a new concept, and I'll say, "Oh, Benson, you should write a book on that." And we laugh about it, and he's probably has like 30 books he has to write, according to things I've identified. So I asked him if he would interview on certain topics and to get it out to listeners like you. So today we're going to talk about 4 forms of vision: looking ahead, looking back. We're going to get into this formula and why it's very useful, I think, a useful framework for people to make decisions and evaluate them in the context of their lives. So welcome, Benson.
Thank you so much, Rich. It's always a pleasure, always delighted speaking with you, because you are such a great guy who is adding so much value.
Thanks, Benson. I appreciate it. Well, as usual, in case listeners don't know you, can you just give a bit about your background, and then we'll talk about, Consistent Profit Tree and the 4 visions you've spoken about.
Absolutely. My name is Benson Agbortogo. I was born and raised in Cameroon, West Africa. I migrated to the United States a little bit about 20 years ago to study business, as I was prompted by the Holy Spirit. And after my business school, I decided to bring the faith elements and my business training together so I can really bring the universal principles of God to help people and businesses grow consistently.
So just to start with, what are these universal principles, and then we'll go back to Profit Tree.
Absolutely. Universal principles that God has created, and they work consistently everywhere. An example would be that all of us know would be the principle, or we can call it the law of gravity. So it doesn't matter what part of the world you are, gravity is going to work. So that is an easy one. But the universal principle that we will obviously be anchoring part of our conversation here today is the principle of sowing and reaping. Some people call it cause and effect, really the same thing. And so all over the world, it doesn't matter your educational status, your race, your age, it doesn't matter what country you come from, this principle works for everybody. So for every effect you want in your life, you want to cause it to happen. Let me put it this way. For every fruit you want in your life, you have to plant a seed. And when you plant that seed and cultivate it, it will grow and produce fruit after its kind, irrespective of the state of the economy. It doesn't matter if Democrats controlling Congress or Republicans are in the White House. It doesn't matter. Trees just grow, irrespective of the economy. So that's a core principle that really influences everything we do at consistent profit tree.
That's excellent. Why is it important to know that some people say, yeah, of course there's gravity. Day follows night. Thursday follows Wednesday, etc. That's totally obvious. How is that going to help me? What would you say to that?
If you are ignorant of what is obvious, then you are going to be a victim. But if you are knowledgeable of the principles, then you are going to be a victor. So the question I'll ask is, do you want to be a victim of your ignorance, or do you want to be a victor of your knowledge?
Yeah, I would think most people would say victor. But
Absolutely. So it is important then to understand the principles so that you can have victory after victory after victory, instead of experiencing the feelings of a victim after a victim after a victim. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people in the society who are feeling like victims and they want sympathy, but really what they need is just getting knowledge so they can move from being victims to being victors.
Okay. So knowing that certain things will always occur and that consistency, does that give comfort to people and spur them into action, or what does it do?
It should give everybody an assurance. So if I know that every day is 24 hours and every week is 7 days, that is a consistent fact that can enable me to plan my growth and be assured that no matter what is happening, this consistent principle of time is always going to be in effect. So it gives me something stable that nobody can take away from me. So it's now left to me to use that knowledge to my advantage. So this can be a good place for us to start diving into the 4 dimensions of vision. So if I already know that every day is 24 hours, every week is 7 days, every year is 365 days, except for a leap year where we have 366, then I can predict my future with my calendar.
Is this part of the reason why the business world operates on quarters?
Yes. So businesses operate on quarters. It's very, very useful because it gives you a specific unit of time, 3 months, a quarter, to really plan accordingly. And if you have 4 good quarters in a year, you're going to have a good year. But I even go to a smaller unit. Why only look at the macro quarter? Bring it down to the weekly level where you have 13 weeks in a quarter, and then bring it down to 1 week. So if you have a very good week and you do that 13 times in a row, you have a good quarter. But you can even bring that down to even a much more micro level if you focus on the day. Because a lot of people are used to, if they have a bad day, or let me say if they have a bad morning, they just say, my morning has been bad. Today is a bad day. So they just waste the rest of the day without knowing that is impacting the week. And that week is going to impact the quarter. And the quarter or that week is going to impact the month. And the month is going to impact the quarter. And the quarter is going to impact the year. And the year is going to impact your life.
Well, how have you seen it, for instance, again, maybe this is obvious, but, someone says, oh, this happens and it's the morning, the day is ruined. I give up. I'm going back to sleep. What have you seen that does to somebody, for instance?
So if they do that, then they will ruin a day that could have been rescued. So if you have a bad morning, let's say the morning was just 3 hours and boy, some things happened the way you were not expected and 3 hours have been wasted, well, you have the rest of the day. So if you are somebody who works 8 hours a day and 3 hours have been full of distractions, then you can still salvage the other 5 and do something with that 5. So that will now put you in a place where if you are working 40 hours a week, and 3 hours were messed up on Monday, now you will not waste 8 hours, but you still have 37 productive hours that week.
Okay, that makes sense. What does this do? You've often talked to me about consistency. I think it's really important to bring that in before we go forward, because that's like the underpinning idea of everything you do. So if you can, talk a bit about that.
Absolutely. So consistency is really anchored on understanding the principle or the law of time. And that is consistent for everybody. Everybody in the world has 24 hours. The richest man has 24 hours. The poorest man has 24 hours. The youngest person today has 24 hours. The oldest person in the world today has 24 hours. So time is consistent. But how come that some people produce far more than others when they have the same units of time, also the same number of hours in a day or in a week? It really comes down to how people plan their lives and their ability to be able to overcome distractions so that they can stay on track. So if we look at the 4 dimensions of vision, one is what I call review. So you always want to look at what has happened in the past, because that will give you a clue of patterns in your life. Then in your planning, the second dimension of vision is looking at where you are right now. And then the third dimension, and I'll come to this 4 dimension a little bit more detail here in a few minutes. The third dimension is preview. So you are looking into the future. And then the 4th dimension is overview. So you have review, view, preview, and overview. So those 4 views give you a 360-degree view of your life, so that as you progress, you will know the things that are distracting you or the things that are causing you not to be as consistent as you desire to be. So knowing that time is consistent, you can now set goals and then track those goals using the 4 dimensions of vision.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
Well, what would be an example of view, review, overview, all that stuff, the 4 visions?
Okay, I really want to anchor this so everybody listening is not a stranger to the fact that my faith is very, very important. So I want to anchor this on using faith as an example. So if I say I am going to pray or study my Bible every day for an hour, I'll give that as an example. That is actually my target. And then every day I put a schedule on my calendar. At this point is 4 to 5 usually. There are some days that I miss it because I overslept, so I end up doing it at other times. But the goal is to ensure that, okay, from 4 a.m. to 5 a.m., that is my time that I have scheduled to study my Bible. Now, when 4 a.m. arrives and I find myself doing something else instead of studying the Bible, then the question becomes, what is that thing that I am doing that is distracting me from studying my Bible? And if that happens over time, it will now cause me to review my week and say, wow, this week I wasn't able to study my Bible at 4 a.m. 3 times in a row. This is because I slept late. So now going into the new week, which will now be preview, I will say, you know what? To prevent this from happening again, I am going to start sleeping early so I can wake up early and not miss the time I have allocated to study my Bible at 4 a.m. Then, go ahead.
Well, one quick question here. What most people, I would guess, they don't think about it in the moment. And then maybe a week later, a month later, whenever it is, when things don't work out, they say, oh, I just got distracted, or I didn't do it, or they just give up, maybe even without thinking about it. I don't know.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. So it'll be like a driver who is driving to a destination. They miss their exit, but because they are not paying attention, they just keep driving in the wrong direction. And an hour later, they're like, oops. Oh my goodness, I am way off where I'm supposed to be going. How did this happen? One reason, distraction. So the key is to be paying attention moment by moment. I would say day by day or hour by hour, which is why the view aspect of the 4 dimensions or the 4 views of vision is so important. Because if you are not paying attention to your calendar, then you go off track without noticing it until 1 month later, you are now in crisis. You're like, man, how did this start? Well, it started a month ago, but you are not paying attention. You neglect the aspect.
So this is when you're engaged in a process or something, and you want to make sure you're on track and course correct as you go. But what about the 4 views for planning? How do you use it there?
So for planning, I will first of all look at my review, which will be the past. So I will say, for example, business related. I will say, okay, last year we did 2 million in revenue. That's just an example. Okay, so this year we are planning to grow our revenue by at least 20%. So since we did 2 million in revenue last year, so this year we should be aiming for 2.4. That should be correct, right, Rich?
Okay, that's a goal, right? Sure.
Okay, so that becomes a goal. So that gives me a preview of my goal. So I set that as my goal for the next year and said, okay, 2.4 million is the goal for next year. So if we were just to average that out within a 12-month period, then we are ending up with something as close as 2.4. So 24 divided by 12 to make it, relatively easy. So we are looking at about 200,000 every month, approximately. So when I schedule that 200,000 every month, approximately, so at the end of the year, now that gives us 2.4 million. So that is a preview of the year. So every month, I want to look at I want to view what actually came in. So let's say January, what came in was, 100,000 instead of 200,000. Well, because I'm paying attention, I will now say, wow, okay, this month I was able to actually accomplish just 50% of my goal instead of the 100%, which would have been 200,000. Now it'll cause me to look at why did I only accomplish 50%? So it will force me now to go back and look at the month and look at the activities that were going on so that I can make some changes going into the future so that in February, I have a greater shot of actually doing 200,000, which is what I have planned for each month. Now, if I wasn't paying attention and tracking my results, you know what will happen? I would just go through the year blindly. Then at the end of the year, when I'm filing my taxes, I realize, oh, we only did 1.5. Oma, it's too late. You can't do anything at that time.
So what happens if you look too often? Like how often is too often where it doesn't allow you to enact your plan, or it doesn't allow you to really give the system or whatever it is enough time to respond properly?
I would say looking at your macro results every month is a healthy place to do, a healthy time frame.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also look at what I call growth dominoes on a daily and a weekly basis. What do I mean by that? So if I want to produce 200,000 a month in revenue, and that tells me that, okay, I have, 5 salespeople on my team, and those salespeople, they are supposed to invest a minimum of 3 hours every single day making phone calls. That's just an example. Now, I will not pay attention to the revenue every day, but I will pay attention to the fact that did these salespeople, did they invest 3 hours every day to make those calls? Because I know that if they fail to invest 3 hours every day, then at the end of the month, I will not be surprised if we are not able to hit our targets.
Makes sense, yeah.
So I am paying attention to the growth domino, which is making phone calls for this example, but I will only look at the revenue number at the end of the month. So I will pay attention to my growth dominoes every day and every week, but I'll pay attention to the macro results every month. Another example would be weight loss, bringing it personal. Okay. If I want to lose weight, I am not going to step on the scale every day. I mean, that doesn't just make any sense. But I can say, you know what? If I exercise every day and I eat healthy every day, at the end of the month, my weight should go down. That is predictable. So now if I miss my exercise every day and I'm just eating junk, that is also predictable. It tells me that when I climb on that scale at the end of the month, I'm going to say, oh my God, what happened to me?
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are the growth dominoes you referred to, in case people don't know?
So it depends on what aspect of life you are focusing on. So business, for example, a growth domino will be when it comes to increasing sales, you want to make sure that those calls are made every single day. That will predict if you are going to close deals at the end of the week and at the end of the month or not. So the number of sales that your salespeople are making, that will be a good example of a growth domino when it comes to marketing and sales for a business. Now, if we take that down to a personal level and we say you really want to increase your skill in any area of your life, you want to become a better speaker, a better writer, and it doesn't matter what skill you want to grow. A growth domino in that area of increasing your skill will be reading for at least 30 minutes in that area that you want to increase your skill on. Reading good books that are related to that skill at least 30 minutes every single day. So if you do that, I guarantee by the end of the month, you will notice that your skill in that area has increased. So reading becomes a growth domino. So you know that if you don't read, at the end of the month, there's no way your skill would have grown. So your growth domino, which predicts that your skill is going to grow, is reading every single day for 30 minutes in that area that you want to grow your skill. So that is on your
Do you add up? Let's say your program is going to be for 1 year. Every day you're going to read something for 30 minutes. Do you then also add up all the time and multiply it out to see the total amount of time that you're going to spend doing this activity and reflect on what that means?
Periodically at the end of the week, and I would say at the end of the month. I don't want to wait until the end of the year because that is too far off.
No, but I mean, you do your reviews along the way, but let's say at the end of the year, you can review the year and say, wow, I spent 2,684 minutes reading about XYZ. Look at all I did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that helps you to actually convey that information to the marketplace that you are a subject matter expert in this area, because look at how much time you have invested studying that area. And that will give you confidence, and that will give your clients confidence that, geez, man, this man or this woman really knows this subject, because look at how much time he or she has consistently invested studying this particular subject matter. So it gives you confidence, it conveys value to the marketplace, and it causes you to stand apart from the competition.
Yeah, one thing, when you told me about this a while ago, I thought, okay, so there's some activities this year, if I do it once a week, that's 50 or 52 times, I can do that activity. If I do every day, it's 365. If I do every month, it's 12. So, I started thinking about, okay, what activities, if I did them 12 times a year, would get me further? And which ones, if I did them 365, would get me further? And, 52. So it seemed like an easy, I guess, bookkeeping or filing system for certain projects on how to allocate your time.
Absolutely. So, Rich, it comes down to, first of all, having that vision to say that, okay, this year, I want to achieve X. That is a vision for the year, whatever X is, spiritually, business-related, family-related. And then you say to yourself, okay, for me to achieve X, what is the one thing? I'll give a concrete example. So if I say this year, by the end of this year, I really want to hear God's voice so clearly. That is a very good spiritual goal. So I say to myself, okay, if I'm going to hear God's voice so clearly by the end of the year, so I have a deeper understanding of God's voice, what is the one thing that if I do daily will help me the most to be able to hear and understand God's voice? Reading the Bible becomes an obvious thing. So that becomes my daily growth domino for hearing God's voice. You see how everything relates?
Yeah.
So now I just say to myself, okay, how at the level at which I want to hear and understand God's voice, how many minutes should I be investing every day to read my Bible? Voila, that is established, and then you have it on your calendar. Then you say, which other activity that if I do weekly would really help me to be able to grow spiritually and hear and understand God's voice? In my example, fasting is that weekly activity. So fasting is my weekly spiritual growth domino. So now I just put on my calendar that every week I am going to fast 1 day a week. So now every year that becomes 52 times in a year that I have fasted, which is far more than fasting 40 days in a year. But because it was done every week consistently, it builds spiritual momentum and power.
Wow. Okay. So as you've advised different people to do this in their business and their life, what kind of feedback have you gotten, and how has it honed your system?
So the feedback I have received is, number one, it is easy for you to recognize when you are off track by looking at your consistency rate. So how do you calculate your consistency rate? Your consistency rate is your budgeted time or your actual time divided by your budgeted time. So for example, if I budget 30 minutes to read my Bible today, and at the end of today, I discovered that I was able to read my Bible for 30 minutes. So my consistency rate for today is 100%. You see that? On the other hand, if I plan to read my Bible for 30 minutes and I only succeeded to read my Bible for 20 minutes, then my consistency rate for reading my Bible for that day becomes 66%. So now I am able to say, gee, I am just 66% of where I'm supposed to be today. So I was distracted. So I want to make sure that I don't continue going off track. So the following day, I am able to get back on track quickly. So your consistency rate is now synonymous to your recalculate. You know,
It's also, I guess, like grades in school. You know, if you get a 70%, that's a C, 80 is a B, 90 is an A, but you don't need 100%. I mean, I would think that a lot of people maybe like, oh, I didn't get 100%, I'm bad. You know, what level should people shoot for? I mean, besides 100%.
In my system, I have three color codes. 80% and above is a green. You always want to be in the green. Between 60%, between 60% and 79%, you are in the yellow zone. Below 60%, now you are in the red zone. So you don't have to be you don't want to be at 100%. So long as you are 80% and above, you should be fine.
Okay, that's reasonable. You don't need 100%, so that's good.
You don't need 100%. You just need to be in the green zone, which is 80% or more. That is it. So long as you are 80% or more in your consistency rate, you can rest assured that the goal you want to achieve at the end of the month or the end of the quarter or the end of the year, you are going to achieve that goal. On the other hand, if you are consistently below 80%, that should also tell you that a goal you want to achieve, you are not going to achieve it.
Okay.
So your consistency rate becomes the predictor of your results.
Well, why would someone assume, oh, I'm only doing 80%? How's that going to get me to my goal? It'll get me to 80% of my goal. Or do you structure it in such a way that you give yourself room?
Yes, you give yourself room to grow. And if you achieve 80% of every goal you set, you'll be in the top 1% of the world. Because
I guess people's consistency scores aren't very good then, normally.
Because most people aim very low. And so when they aim very low and they end up achieving everything, then they are living below their potential. You always want to set your goal to stretch yourself so that your potential grows.
What do you do if, you have problems with being a perfectionist? A lot of people seem to say that. So what can they do to help themselves?
So if somebody has a problem in being a perfectionist, then what I'll encourage that person to say is to now begin to work on themselves, not to become perfect, but leave room for innovation. So when they achieve a particular target, then they want to innovate and become better. So instead of becoming a perfectionist, you should become an innovator.
Okay. What about course correction?
Innovation is healthier than perfection.
That's true, right? Perfection you can never reach.
Yes.
There's innovation, I guess, in the beginning and through the process, but what about course correcting? How do you know when you're part of the way through something, this is just not going to get me there, it's not working? How do you do the right look ahead to see I'm just too far off track? If I keep going, I just won't make it.
Okay, so what I encourage people to do is if you set a goal, going back to the business goal, 200,000 every month, and you go through the first 90 days, the quarter. So at the end of that quarter, if your goal is 200,000 a month, you are supposed to be at 600,000 at the end of that quarter. So if you look at it and you say to yourself that at the end of that quarter, if you have not achieved at least 80% of your goal, then you should adjust that goal by 20%. So 80% of 600,000 will give us 480,000. So at the end of the first quarter, if you haven't achieved at least 480,000 in revenue, Then going into the next quarter, you should reduce your goal by at least, 20%. So 20% of 200,000 will bring you down to, okay, now I wasn't able to hit this whole thing. Let me reduce my goal by at least 20%. So in that way, you are now aiming for 80% of that 200,000, which will now mean instead of aiming for 200,000 every month in the second quarter, you now bring it to 160,000 every month.
How do you set goals that you have a chance to achieve? They're not too lofty and they're not too easy, where there's no fun in achieving them.
That is where, going back to vision, you want to look at what you have been able to do in the past. And so if you look at what you have done in the past, you want to go for 20% to about 50% if you are really aggressive. But beyond that, you are really, really stretching, and it can become miserable. So 20%, between 20% and 50% is really a sweet spot. Beyond 50%, then now you are really, really, really stretching it.
Okay. Again, that's good guardrails. That's reasonable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And remember that, Rich, 20 to 50% puts you within the realm of nature. What do I mean by that? No matter how much food you give a kid, the kid cannot jump from 3 years to automatically 5 years and skip 4. So there's a natural rhythm of growing. So you don't want to overfeed a child, because if you overfeed a child, then the child can even die. So you want to give them the regular quantity of food, but the key is consistently. And if you give that child food, if you feed your child consistently, they are going to grow, guaranteed. If you feed your business consistently, that business is going to grow healthily, guaranteed. Anything you feed consistently is going to grow in a healthy manner. But if you overfeed it because you are too greedy, then that thing is going to die, possibly. And if you do not give that thing adequate food, then that thing can also die. So the key is looking at your life, looking at your business, looking at your family, looking at every area of your life and saying, okay, if I feed these areas consistently with my growth dominoes, then I am going to grow consistently. That is key. But in terms of measurement, 20 to 50% is a really good guardrail for anybody to aim for.
Okay. How have you seen various people react to this when you tell them about it, propose it to them? Like, what are some of the reactions, and what's some of the feedback people have gotten when they've done this system?
So the reaction is usually in the very beginning, they say, "Man, this is so challenging to track everything I'm doing." So yeah, when you started walking, it was challenging. You fell on your butt several times, but did you give up? Did you say, oh, there's no use learning how to walk, I will just go on my bottom all my life? I said, no, you didn't do that. You kept trying. And before you knew it, you could start. And before you knew it, you could take a couple of steps. And look at you today, you are running. I said, that is the attitude you need to have. So when people have persisted through tracking their growth dominoes, not tracking everything. You want to focus just on the growth domino. After a period of time, they're like, wow, it is just happening naturally. Look at how the revenue is growing. Look at how the profit is growing. I said, that is exactly what it is supposed to be. And then the other reaction that I've received is, people will start tracking their consistency rate, and after a period of time, they stop. When they now get into crisis, they say to me, Benson, I know exactly why I'm in this crisis. I said, tell me. They said, I stopped being consistent. So you're exactly right. And those are the people who go through roller coaster coaster, roller coaster. They start doing the things that help them grow, and then once they start growing, they stop doing them.
Oh, why does that happen? Because things are going well, so there's no pressure and you ease off?
There is no pressure, they ease off, they become complacent, and until they hit rock bottom again, they're like, oh, why did I stop doing what I was doing? And then they get back to it. I used to joke that if God didn't make breathing automatic, many people would not be alive. Because no, breathing is automatic, so it's consistent, so people are still living. But if people had to use their will to breathe consistently, a lot of people will be dead because they will not breathe consistently. They will want to take an oxygen vacation, which is not a good idea, you know.
That's funny. Have you had people argue with you why this can't work, doesn't work, shouldn't work, etc.? Like any pushback you've gotten that it would be interesting to talk about?
Absolutely. The pushback I've received is, oh, I don't want my life to be so structured. And my response will be, wow, so you like your life to be chaotic? I'm like, what do you mean? So, well, you just told me that you don't like your life to be so structured. Oh, okay, that makes sense. No, I don't want my life to be chaotic. Then the other pushback I'll receive is, well, I like my freedom. I like to be a free spirit, just do anything I want with my time, anytime I want. I said, that is absolutely fantastic. So do you go to your bank anytime you want to get money from? I said, no. I said, what happens if you went to your bank? You have money in that account? You went there at midnight trying to enter that building to get your money. I said, what will happen? He said, I'll be arrested. I said, are you sure you have your money there? Why would they arrest you for trying to go into that building at 12 midnight to get your money? And the response I'll get is, because that is not the right time to go into the bank. I said, so the bank has a structure of opening and closing hours? Wow, I never knew that. So they will start laughing.
I was thinking about that, right? Businesses that have consistent hours, you know. And there's some businesses that have every day is different hours, so it makes it confusing. But the ones that are just, 10 to 10, 7 days a week, you're like, okay, great, I know. I don't have to think about it.
Rich, that creates trust. And you cannot do business with any business that you don't trust.
That's true. Yeah, consistency, yes.
Just imagine if you showed up at your neighborhood Starbucks. One day they open at 12. The other day they open at 8. The other day they open at 2 p.m. You never know when they are open. I guarantee you will not trust that Starbucks.
Yep, exactly. Yep, it's true.
And so without consistent operating hours, confidence is eroded. Confidence is another word for trust. And people will not want to do business with you. Or you set an appointment with a client and you show up 30 minutes late and you say, well, I'm a free spirit. I just do anything whenever I want. So,
yeah, thank God I've never, ever done that. I've never been late to an appointment in my life.
Exactly. So without structure or without having consistent time for everything that you're doing, then, everything would just be chaotic. As a matter of fact, there won't be time for anything. Anybody will do anything whenever they want it. And our whole world is just going to be chaotic. So when I use those examples, it causes people to realize, wow, I really have to organize my life, because being organized is far better than going through agonization. So I have a saying that says, organize or agonize. The choice is yours.
Okay. So what happens, people usually aren't just solo actors. If you advise, let's say, a business owner and they have a family, what have you seen? How does it change the family dynamics? Does it put strain? Let's say the person you're advising is trying to be consistent and the family is used to not being consistent and they're like, come on, Dad, let's do this. So the wife's like, oh, come on, let's do this, take a break. And they try to, undo your consistent attempts.
Well, then what you do as a leader is to train them, because the reality is if they knew everything they needed to know, then they wouldn't have need for a parent. So the parent is there to train, the children. And Rich, that is actually a very good question, because I've experienced it in my home. where I will say, we are going to do this at this time, we are going to do this at this time. And then I remember one time my wife said, give the children a break. Let them relax. Don't make everything so structured. I said, well, why don't we give them a break as to when they go to school? Let them just go to school at any time they want. They don't need to show up when the principal says show up at this time. With that example, it began to sink in. And I said, well, I don't want to put constraints on you people. But if we say this is a time we are going to eat, this is a time we are going to watch a movie, and then this is the other time when you just have fun, do anything you want. I said there's a reason why Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 says there's a time for every act and a season for every activity under heaven. I say if God put that in the Bible, then he is not stupid. He wants us to have freedom, but there's time for us to have fun. There's time for us to eat. There's time for us to play. There's time for us to walk. That is why Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, there's a time and a season for every activity under heaven. I say if the author of life has written that, then we better follow that. So there's usually a little bit of resistance, but after a period of time, when they see that it is actually a good thing for everybody, then everybody really begins to fall in line.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay.
And the other thing too that happened one time is, especially, I run my own business, you run your own business. A lot of people listening to us might be running their business. There were times when my wife would say, hey, I really want you to do X, Y, Z for me. I say, honey, that will mean that I'll have to take off some time from work in order to do that. I'm fine to do that. I have the freedom to be able to do that. But that will also mean that I will have to make up that time on a Saturday. And she goes, no, I don't want you working on Saturday. Saturday is family time. I said, good. So let's keep work time, and then family time. And on Saturday, I can do this thing for you. Fine, just do it on Saturday. Problem solved.
Okay.
Because the reality, Rich, is if you have time for the various accounts of your life, you have time for your spiritual account, you have time for your personal account, you have time for your family account, you have time for your business account, you have time for your community account. Those are the 5 major accounts I encourage everybody to have. If you withdraw from one of those accounts and spend that money on another account, if you don't replace that money over time, you are going to bankrupt that account.
That's true.
So if you keep withdrawing from your family account to work because you are a workaholic, you will soon bankrupt your family. If you withdraw time from your spouse account to even spend that time with your children instead of spending the time with your spouse, you will soon bankrupt your marriage.
True.
And if you goof around and the time that you are supposed to work, you are using that time to have fun, you will soon be out of business. So every aspect of our lives require a healthy investment of time so that we can have the return on our investment that we expect. And you cannot expect an amazing marriage, but you are investing 5 minutes a day with your spouse. It's not going to cut it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And so that takes us back to the law, which is the anchor law that we began this program talking about, the law of sowing and reaping. Whatever you sow, that is what you are going to reap. So if you expect to raise amazing children, invest a healthy number of hours every week training them. If you expect to reap a fruitful, blossoming marriage, then invest quality time with your spouse every week. If you expect an amazingly profitable business, then invest time in that business to train employees, to make sure that you have adequate, efficient systems that operate consistently to give you those results. And that is one of the biggest mistakes I've seen business owners make. When I encourage them to invest time to create systems in their business. They tell me they don't have time to create systems. They are busy just doing the work.
They say, I don't have time to save time.
That is exactly right. They will say, I don't have time to save time. I have time to waste time. That is eloquently expressed, Rich.
Well, we talked about this before that, people may not have money, but everyone has at least some time. And so if you can invest your resources, and one of them is at least a bit of time, you can be a time investor and still get a return.
That is right. Not everyone has at least time. Every single human being on the face of the earth listening to you and I today, everyone has 24 hours. So it's just a matter of what kind of return do I want in my life, and then invest time in that area so that you can get that return. And the amazing thing about consistency, Rich, is when you invest time consistently in any area of your life, over a period of time, your results are compounded. So you have compound interest results, not simple interest.
All right. So for listeners, if they're interested in implementing this on their own, fantastic. If they want your help, Benson, what do they need to be or do to qualify to speak to you, and how do they reach you? So let's go through all that.
So the people who really qualify for my help right now, just because of my focus, are business people. If you own a business, and you really want to establish consistency in your business and in your life, because when I work with businesses, I don't just focus on business. Most people hire me for that, but I focus on the whole person because I want to make sure that you are succeeding in business and you are succeeding at home. So the simplest way would be to go to moreprofitmap.com, moreprofitmap.com. That will give any listener access to my calendar. So more, M-O-R-E, moreprofitmap.com, moreprofitmap.com. That will give you access to my calendar. When you go there, you'll see my calendar and you'll see the time that I'm available to talk to you, because I want to know exactly what is happening in your life and in your business right now before we look at the systems that needs to be put in place so that you can start enjoying compound interest results. So moreprofitmap.com will take anyone to my calendar and they can schedule an appointment, for us to look at where they are, where they want to go, and the time that needs to be invested to get them there in a timely manner.
Well, that's excellent. Well, Benson, thanks again for coming. I really enjoy speaking with you multiple times, and I'm going to have you back again, I'm sure, in the future. So again, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rich, for having me. You are such a great example of somebody who is investing time to add so much value. So your listeners are really blessed to have you with the work that you have done. And I pray that God will continue to give you many more years so that you can maximize your value before you exit.
Thank you, Benson. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.